Lucy in the Sky was inspired by a drawing John Lennon's son made. Only 300 people attended the Beatles' first concert in the USA. Yesterday was originally called Scrambled Eggs by McCartney as a placeholder. The Beatles' music was banned in the USSR until the 80s. Abbey Road was almost titled Everest after a brand of cigarettes. John Lennon's death led to a simultaneous moment of silence observed by 225,000 people in Central Park. Sgt. Pepper's was the first rock album to win the Grammy for Album of the Year. Ringo wasn't the original drummer. Pete Best was replaced by Ringo Starr in 1962. Strawberry Fields is not just a song, but a real place in Liverpool where John played as a child. George Harrison was only 27 when the Beatles broke up. The Beatles stopped touring because their music couldn't be heard over the screaming fans. Let It Be was actually recorded before Abbey Road, but released after. The famous Abbey Road cover was shot in less than 10 minutes. The Beatles invented the idea of hidden tracks on albums. Paul McCartney played all the instruments on some of his solo albums. The phrase "Paul is dead" was a fan theory that sparked intense media speculation. None of the Beatles could read music. They composed and played by ear and memory. A Day in the Life has an orchestra crescendo that musicians were instructed to play as a chaotic improvisation. The Beatles' Help! Film was filmed in color to promote color TVs. John Lennon once said he didn't even remember recording one entire album because of his heavy drug use. The Beatles once held the top 5 positions on the Billboard Hot 100 simultaneously. The Sgt. Pepper album cover features a crowd of the band's influences, including historical figures and celebrities. Hey Jude was originally written by McCartney to comfort John Lennon's son Julian during his parents' divorce. Ringo Starr took a photo of a group of high school students skipping school in 1964, who didn't realize it was him. The final public performance of the Beatles was on the rooftop of Apple Records in 1969. The Beatles were introduced to marijuana by Bob Dylan. Before forming the Beatles, John Lennon led a band called the Quarrymen. George Harrison introduced the sitar in Western pop music on the track Norwegian Wood. The Beatles refused to play for segregated audiences in the US, influencing the venues to change their policies. Eleanor Rigby is a song that features none of the Beatles playing instruments, only a double-string quartet. The Beatles' first recording session at Abbey Road lasted just under 1 hour. The song Blackbird was written by McCartney in response to the U.S. civil rights struggle. The Beatles hold the record for the most #1 hits on the Hot 100 chart, with 20. The album Revolver features the first use of a backward vocal track in a pop song. Yellow Submarine was actually a children's song and inspired an animated movie. John Lennon once controversially stated that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. Octopus's Garden was one of the few Beatles songs written by Ringo Starr. George Martin, often called the fifth Beatle, was their influential producer who shaped their sound. The Beatles movie A Hard Day's Night was nominated for 2 Academy Awards. The Beatles' music was played in space when It Crossed the Universe was beamed into space by NASA. The album Abbey Road is one of the best-selling albums of all time. The Beatles were the first band to feature lyrics on their album covers, starting with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The initial pressings of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band included cardboard cutouts and other unique inserts. The first use of feedback in a commercial song was by the Beatles in I Feel Fine. George Harrison met his future wife Pattie Boyd on the set of A Hard Day's Night. The song In My Life is often voted as one of the best Beatles songs in fan polls. The Beatles have influenced many modern genres, from psychedelic rock to heavy metal. All You Need Is Love was performed by the Beatles during their first live global television link. The Beatles' final studio album was Let It Be, although most of its tracks were recorded before those on Abbey Road. Beatles' Apple boutique closed after just 8 months, famously giving away its stock for free on the last day.